Aaron, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you today because we're going to cover about a 10-month or 12-month period of your life, right? Where you went and built one of the hottest AI startups and then you exited. And so why don't we start with what led to wanting to do a startup? Had you ever done that before, or at least at that capacity, been that level entrepreneur?
Um, no, no, I hadn't done it before.
Right.
Before I had joined, I was employee number one at a startup before that. And that very much felt like being a founder. We were building from scratch, essentially, a concept that didn't exist. Uh, and, I don't know, I just kind of felt like, and even before that, I was at smaller companies, that you could classify startups, although, we weren't using that term back then as much. But I just thought I got enough experience seeing what it was like to run a company, to start a company, and to build from scratch an idea,
Right.
a concept. And I loved the sort of, the guerrilla campaigns and the work that you had to do, just rolling up your sleeves and getting in there and building stuff yourself. I don't know, I just loved it. I've always been that kind of person. I think not a one-man band, but somebody who just likes to just dive in and just try stuff and do things, and why not? Eventually, and this is advice for all founders, is that
Yeah.
you do have to learn to delegate at some point. Because I think all founders, all entrepreneurs have that aspect to them. It's very hard. It's very hard for me even to this day to relinquish something that I was doing to somebody else and not feel like I need to keep
Yeah.
it.
That's a very common struggle. What is it that makes it so hard?
I mean, I think part of it is, I think you can't ignore that part of it's your ego, for sure.
Okay.
Part of it is, this sense that you feel like whatever it is you've built is a reflection of you, and you also understand it through and through, and nobody else is really going to feel that way about it, I don't think. And so it just becomes hard to, it's kind of like when you have kids and you first hire your first babysitter, and you go, here's my tiny baby, please don't eat it, right? And you know that they're not going to eat it, and that they're probably very good at what they do, but it's just hard.
It's the quickest dinner you've ever had in your life, right? I mean, you're back in about 45 minutes, right?
So
You're
fast.
right,
Yes,
right.
checking the
Yeah.
phone. Is everything okay? It's like in 30 seconds, your baby's fine.
No, I love where you go with this. So you were employee number one, which you kind of in some ways felt like it kind of had like a co-founderish kind of feel to it, right?
Yes.
So you're taking on responsibility. Sounds like you love the adrenaline, the impact, the testing. You talk about testing stuff and running these blitz campaigns and so forth. And then when it comes to handoff, is the ego is the ego such an interesting word, right? Because there's healthy ego and there's like toxic ego, right? You need some healthy ego, because if not, why would you how could you put up with all the rejection, right? But the toxic ego is kind of what I think we're getting into, because I think this is universal. I know that myself as well. Is there some thinking around like, I'm better than everyone else at this? Like, oh, I just have around this specific thing, I have the best ideas. Does stuff like that come up? The toxic side that you have to battle a little bit?
I would say that, probably a little bit. I can think of one example where we eventually hired a marketing team, and I realized as soon as we hired the marketing team that I was doing marketing. I didn't even think about it beforehand, but
Right.
I realized as soon as they were doing this. So they came out with this one sheet, and I remember I first read it, and it was just wrong. Like, in everything, they were using wrong language. They were describing things incorrectly. There was typos, and it just bothered me. And I think that's what we're afraid of,
Yeah.
is that the thing they're marketing is something I felt like I invented, or at least I really contributed to the invention of. I can't take sole credit, but I really did put my heart and soul into this thing that they're marketing. And then for them to get it wrong, I shouldn't be bothered by it, but I was. I felt like they didn't either fully understand it, or they weren't going to do the job. They weren't going to sell it effectively because
Right.
it was wrong.
Right.
Now, I never took the step and just said, okay, just breathe, think this through. If there's time, like, this is the first draft, we can edit it, this is an opportunity to teach and scale what you know. That's something that I still to this day am learning is, when you do become a subject matter expert, or you do learn a thing so deeply and through, it's super hard to share that with other people. And you have to scale that. And so you just learning how to do that effectively is really important. And
do you think speed plays a role here? Because as a company is successful, the vision is successful, because this could be in corporate as well, right? This could be startup or in corporate America, corporate world. Do you think when things take off, you just don't have time to hold on to that level of, I don't know, detail, control? So by the force of nature, you have to let go, and maybe there's a blessing in disguising that.
Absolutely. Oh, so true. You can't scale when you're
right.
Like, you just can't. So that you have to relinquish control, and you have to figure out how to delegate, and you have to figure out how to be okay with it. There's, like you mentioned, a toxic version of ego and a healthy version of ego.
Yeah.
I think that it's probably a spectrum, and I think that it's hard to classify everything, because there are people who will have a different idea on how to do a thing. So
right.
Let's say I have a different idea of how to sell this product, how to describe it on the website. And the moment you sit down with that person and they show you what they've written, you have to decide, is this better or worse than what I wrote, right? And deciding that it's better is very difficult, because it might actually be better, it might not. And your job as a CEO or as an entrepreneur, I think, is to sit there and make the tough call that says, I think this is better and I'm going to go with it, or I actually don't think this is better, it needs to change. The way I wrote it was better. And you have to be objective about that. And that's what's really hard, because you basically have to parachute your ego out of that scenario, right? And make the decision based on pure objective facts. Now, personally, having done that a lot of times, those, a lot of those little kind of decisions, I typically find that I have more of a bias towards, if I trust a person to be an expert in, say, writing copy or being a marketing person, that their version of it is probably better, because I've learned through trial and error that, when you do get too close to things, that's where this is where the part of the ego that's toxic becomes toxic, because you poison your own understanding of what's going on. And then now you can get into some like psychology discussions about whether or not, you have like a disorder or something where you think so highly of yourself that you're a sociopath, right? And that everything you do is amazing and everybody else sucks. I don't think most people have that problem, but you do at some point need to decide that, hey, this person's an expert. This marketing person is an expert. The copy they're writing is good. It's better than what I wrote. It's more clear, and it's because they're not me that it's better,
right?
It's because they're not like deep into it and so muddled. Just can take a step out and just look at it and say, okay, I'm a new person to this product. I need to understand what it does in a sentence, and it has to be clear.
Right.
So I even forget what the original question was, but
no. I love this conversation, because we're gonna get into your startup here in a second. But I love where you're going with this, because I love when one is pleasantly surprised or this by somebody else's genius, right? I mean, there's so much smart, good, awesome people out there who can take it off your plate and run with it, and it's fabulous. It's just fab, and you know intrinsically it's better than what you could have done. You may have made the seed, but they really took it to something special. It's an amazing feeling. Is that I'm sure you experienced some of that as well.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I think that that's where you have to go, is you have to get to a place where that happens to you.
Right.
Now, for me, I experienced that with amazing developers, computer programmers, right?
Yeah.
World class people. I learned, and this is like now kind of shifting from marketing to kind of more product ownership, that you cannot tell somebody smarter than you let's say in computer programming how to do something, right? Now I've seen that. I've seen product owners and folks in that role who have developers that report to them, tell them what to build, how to build it actually, right? That doesn't work. You have to trust these people that you hired that work for you, and maybe they're your partners, that this is their, like, their value is figuring out how to solve a problem, not being told how to build something and then just building it, you know? And so if you can get to a place where you're comfortable with presenting problems to your team instead of solutions and telling them how to build it,
right,
then that's it. Like, that's what you need to get
that's
to.
right, that's right. That's like letting them loose, right? Just let loose and give them the power and empowerment to go get it done. I love that. Yeah, because I once heard two great different insights on this. One was that it's easier to work with people that are very different than you, because if they're very different, then you're not trying to change them. They're not trying to change you. Like that's so cemented that that's never going to happen. So you get to enjoy each other's differences, and you learn more from people that you know less. Meaning, like you learn more from people you know maybe you're less familiar with, because you're not sharing all the same things. I don't know how this ties in, but I just thought it was an interesting piece of all this pie, you know? Okay. Let's get into your startup, because you decided to take the leap, right? And do this yourself. And you had quite an interesting run. I mean, 10 months of that's quite I mean, by anyone's standard, it's It
was quick.
Quick. So tell me what led you to start it? Like what got you going? What made you take the leap to start it?
Well, I think that, you know, I think I had always had an entrepreneurial part of my soul. You know, now they think about it retroactively, you know, that wanted to start businesses and wanted to be in charge, and wanted to build and create. And when you are a startup, when you start a startup, you and your co-founders are like in charge. You decide what happens. And, you know, you get to a certain point in your career. I think I had been working outside, you know, I graduated college in 2005, and this was around 2017 or 18 that we did this. So pretty much that entire time before then, I was working for other people. And, you know, I found, like, sometimes I disagreed with those people, and sometimes I felt like I could do a better job, and sometimes I was really in awe in what they did. It's a balance, right? There is no like one exact thing that happens all the time. And it's good to it's good to sit there and absorb and learn and put your own spin on things. And that's what a startup offered. I think I was just feeling like I could do it. I just felt ready. I just felt like, okay, I had seen enough. I had experienced enough. I'm ready to take this plunge on my own. And I was wrong. I was not ready. I thought I was. I don't think you can be ready.
I don't think, yeah. Well, I think it's funny, right? Because you're ready enough. You have to believe that you're ready so you can take the plunge. Because if not, you'd never do it, right? And then you realize on the other side, oh boy, I'm in the deep end, right? But you made that decision. Did you have other constituents in your life, like a partner or family or a loved one that you also had to enroll into this vision?
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, my wife, you know, bless her, she's just always been so supportive of me. It also helps that she's a surgeon. So, you know, so it wasn't like my whole family was relying on me to make an income. You know, we were pretty much half-seas at that point, but we had young kids. My kids are still young, but they were really young, right, at that point. And, you know, it was bonkers. I mean, I honestly, like, I can't believe I did it. Thinking now that I'm a little bit older, like I mean, I jumped from having a great salary to having no salary,
right,
none, and in the United States in particular, no health insurance, right? Because I had health insurance and then I didn't have health insurance. And, you know, my wife there was an option to get it through her work, but it wasn't as nearly as good as what we had through the job I had prior. And so, we went from, I mean, I had some savings. So I always tell founders, like, save, have a year's worth of expenses saved up, like just plan to not get paid for a full year. I think then you'll be in a really good place. And so, it's funny, like a lot of it now, thinking back on it, is a bit of a blur, especially during that first, like, just hurrah, that jump. I just remember wanting to be free. Like, I really wanted to be free. And that I didn't think too much beyond that. I just thought, oh, I'll just do this. And if actually, originally I thought, I will do this startup and I'll also consult and I'll do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and it'll be fine. And I was just wrong about all of it, but that's what I thought.
Okay, but no, you jump in, you're in the deep end of the pool, like you got buy-in from your key constituents. The topic that's come up for us on this show quite a bit has been like second guessing being part of decision making. Like, it's actually normal. Like, for a lot of folks, was that part for you as well? Something you had to wrestle with, your inner tug, okay, I'm doing it, I'm moving forward. Any of those type of emotions come up for you?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, it's so hard because it's, doing a startup, like the first year, the first few months, it's really a roller coaster emotionally.
Emotionally,
right? Yeah. I mean, in other ways too, but I'm sure I had second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth thoughts. I know I definitely had them later as well, even after we sold and our lives were changed. I still think like, did we do the right thing?
Right. Right.
I may always think that. Honestly, I don't have regrets, but there's always that part of you, and I think this is true really of any decision you make, is what would have happened if I had done this differently or made a different decision?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a useful exercise to dwell on, but it's a good exercise to practice in your mind to get your brain ready for the next time that you have a decision to make, for sure. Which is probably, I think, why we do that as humans, is dwell on these things. But I'm trying to remember, the first time I had second thoughts about whether or not I did the right thing. And I can't really pinpoint. I just remember the first few months being this constant acceleration of intensity.
Right.
Like things just started rolling. Now, I was very lucky in that. So my two co-founders really were the kind of brains, and it really was their idea. And I was very lucky because I was able to just sort of hop on a train that had started to leave the station already.
Yeah.
I mean, my job was to basically put the rocket boosters on it, which I did. But these were my co-founders. They were my friends. They today are my best friends. And we shared in this journey together, and we definitely had our disagreements. We definitely have our differences, but it really helped, I think, to be able to just share the burden with other people.
Share the burden. That's an interesting construct, though, because you're in the first couple of months or whatever, there's a lot of shock and awe, but you begin to sense momentum, things taking off. A lot of people cannot navigate friendship to business, right? Because they're different. So was that, and I'm so happy that you guys came out on the other side. I've actually managed to do that as well, which is not the easiest thing in the world, right? There's a lot of like pulling back and compromise and trusting and so forth. What was that like, renegotiating the relationships? Because on some level, I'm assuming you had to, right?
You mean afterwards or just during?
No, during it, because you're discovering new things about yourself. You never worked together before, I'm assuming, or maybe you had, but not like this, not in this pressure cooker.
Right, it's true. Yeah, we learned. We learned a lot about each other. I think this is why I say I'm lucky, because I think we all had an implicit trust in each other.
Okay. Yeah.
I did know one of them for a long time before. And the other one I had only known for a couple of years, but we had worked together and known each other, and we were really good friends, roughly the same age, the same, mindset and kind of outlook on life. although we had different skills and different strengths and different weaknesses for sure. But I think that's what helped actually, is I think that we recognized that in each other. And so we were able to fill, where I was weak, they were strong.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And and that worked. But yeah, I mean, our friendship, like it definitely was tested. And honestly, I think part of the reason why we decided to sell was, we wanted to do what was best for all of us together as a team, as a group. Like we were, we wanted to just make sure that nobody got screwed over or hurt or damaged in any way. And it's different because it's tough because for me, my two co-founders were not US citizens. So they have completely different, we had different lives, like, in terms of who had kids, who didn't, who was married, who wasn't, who had free healthcare and who didn't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was tough. I would probably do it again. I think it gets easier the second time around when, not getting paid. I think if you really boil it down to it, I think the real stress is just not getting paid.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I love where you're going there, because I think that's exactly right. I think a lot of people have big dreams, big ambitions. They come into it, they do it. In month 3 or 4, they still are not getting paid. And the psychological pressure of that, maybe even social pressure or relational pressure from their peers, spouses, partners, whatever. Tell me about it. Let's go into that, because I think that is exactly right. That people quit because of that, for that reason more than any other reason, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, my wife was very supportive throughout the whole thing. But I definitely got, looks, I could tell in her face, like there were times when she was like, how much longer can we do this? How much longer are you going to do this kind of thing? Between me and my co-founders, our needs for pay were different. Our expenses were different.
Yeah.
My co-founders were also the world-class superstar developers, and easier for them in some ways, I think, to, if they needed to go and do a contract for a couple days to pay the bills, they can do that. And we all agreed that was okay.
Yeah.
Harder for me to do that. Like my skills are a little softer. I was also, a lot of my time was in trying to get investing and just, the normal kind of routine as a CEO is you spend a whole lot of time trying to get investment and not enough time probably focused on other things. My time was split. So it was harder, but I still tried to get, some contract work and things to get paid. The good news is that we started getting paying customers almost immediately.
I know. I love this. Yeah. And you guys got ranked as top 100 companies, all kinds of. So the accolades, that was the flip side of this, is like, okay, I'm not getting paid, but boy, we got customers coming on board, we're being recognized, right? That must have been pretty validating.
It was very validating, and that's really what kept us going. And when I say it's a roller coaster, like that was what was going up. Yes. Whenever the emotional roller coaster was going up, it was because of all that. It's hard. It's really difficult to kind of, even thinking back on it, to break it down in my mind, because whenever you're in these intense emotional things for a long period of time, it does funny things to your memory.
Yeah.
But I just remember being very concerned about getting paid or having enough money to like afford bills and rent, and we tightened the belt. We didn't do it became also very clear to me, like this was affecting not just my life and my wife's life, but my kids. And that's when I started to get really uncomfortable, because we were not able to do piano lessons. We couldn't do ski trips. We couldn't do anything for them. Right. And so, that was all of this to say factored into a larger picture. But that was a stress. That was definitely a stress at the time. And like I said, if you know this going in, if you figured this out ahead of time and you give yourself enough runway to maintain your lifestyle, or at least a portion of it, while you're doing a startup, then that's a good place to be in. But it's hard.
But let's flip the script for a second. You had that kind of pressure, and you strike me as somebody who can operate under that kind of pressure, right? You may feel it, but it doesn't shut you down, right? Do you think on some level without that pressure, you may not have had the type of success you had? Meaning like the pressure was in some ways also refining. It may not have been comfortable. It may have been super uncomfortable, but there were some benefits to it. Am I stretching here, or is, you know?
No, no. I mean, I think this is like this is what risk and reward is all about. I risked everything. I risked going bankrupt. I risked getting sued. I risked this and that.
Yeah.
And the reward was proportionally high, and I feel good. I feel okay about that. It definitely, yeah. I mean, I do tend to operate very well under pressure. Like you said, it's uncomfortable. I don't enjoy it, but that's when I do my best work. I think like you said, it's hard. Doing a startup is hard. Finding product market fit is hard. Getting and I'll just take this probably applies everywhere, but I'll take the example of a software startup. You have to get, especially in B2B, you have to get your product in front of people.
Yeah.
And they have to know about it.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, then you don't succeed, and the pressure increases. So as the pressure increases, you work harder to get your product out more and be more successful. And then the pressure, the pressure doesn't really stop, but it gets less, the climb of it gets less intense as you get more success. So yeah, I would say that the pressure was a key factor. I think if we were, I don't know, if there wasn't any pressure, why would we be motivated to succeed?
Yeah. I was wondering because, again, your story for our audience is so powerful because within 10 months or thereabouts, probably a little sooner, because I think you sold in 10 months, but I could be wrong. Yeah. Somebody came knocking, right? Somebody came and said, hey, love what you guys do. Got a big bag of money here. What, want to sell, right? And so what was that like? Did that come out of the blue? I mean, did that scenario just kind of happen very quickly?
Well, I think we all hoped it would happen. Yeah. I mean, I like to think that, you're not, when you found a company, especially if you're talking to VCs and investors, you're not supposed to say, we want to eventually just get acquired.
Right.
Quickly, right. But I think it would be foolish to pretend like that's not something you want. Now you can't, the funny thing is, you're always told, typical motivation classes or whatever, set a goal and reach that goal, right? But it's different with startups because I don't think you can really set one goal. I think, I mean, you could say, I want to be successful. I want to grow the company. Okay. But there's a lot of different outcomes that can happen. You can go public, you can be acquired, you can, I don't know, you could acquire somebody else, you could pivot, right? There's all sorts of different outcomes that can happen. Yeah, I mean, I think so to be perfectly honest, even I remember a couple months in, I identified the company that eventually did acquire us. I identified them early on as a potential acquisition target, although, I didn't put any date on it, but I knew that they could acquire us. And so, we set about a strategy to make that something that could happen, by working with them and showing our value to them. That ended up paying off. Now, it happened way sooner than we thought it would happen. And when it did happen, I'll never forget the phone call. The CEO called me and said, hey, how about an acquisition? And I had a feeling that would happen in the phone call, but really, even then, just hearing those words.
I know it's actually happening, right? It's not theory anymore. It's happening. Yeah. Big difference. Big difference.
It is a big difference. And honestly, it also, just because the CEO says that doesn't mean it will happen. There is a ton of stuff that has to happen before you can get acquired. But I just remember kind of leaning back in my chair. Was this chair I'm sitting in now, and thinking, okay, let's do the quick math in our heads, right? Now, I don't think at that point there was any money offered, but I knew they weren't going to offer us $1 trillion. we were 10 months in, right? So there was definitely a range. And so the math is, you have to think, okay, if my outcome is to become wealthy or to make money off this endeavor some way, and to feel good about it, and for, for the work that you have done to end up going somewhere that gets used. And I was in the middle of doing a fundraise, but I had just started raising our angel round too. So
Right.
that further complicated it, because I could say no acquisition. We're gonna raise our round. We're gonna raise $1
Good
million.
options. Good options. Yeah.
Right. And so then you think, okay, if I raise my round, I raise $1 million. Now my valuation is at, $5 million. Okay, so now I can't sell because I just raised my round, and I want to grow, because otherwise why raise your round? So the next thing is, okay, so I get to a point where I'm going to go to Series A, and maybe now my valuation is 20 million. Well, my share is diluted now. So I realized that through the calculations that how much I would make personally out of an acquisition would be the same. It may be even less, like if we had kept going.
Yeah.
So, the point at which it gets really big, I think, is further down, Series B, maybe Series C, IPO. But you have to be very careful with venture capitalism. They will take a big chunk of your company, and they want you to have some ownership so that you are motivated by money to succeed. But that chunk ended up being probably roughly the same as when we had no investors, and the three of us just owned the company outright. So that's the kind of math that we did at that moment, for the money reason. Now there's other reasons too. We really, we did want to grow this. We wanted to see where this could go. We felt like we were just getting started. Like we had just started. Like the traction was exploding. We were like getting famous. People were writing articles about us and tweeting about us, and like you have to decide if you want to let that go. And obviously, long story short, at the end of the day, we decided to take the acquisition offer, and by the time it closed, it was I think 11, maybe 10 months from founding to acquisition close.
So I love this. So you close, pop the champagne, nice dinner, celebrate. This is fantastic. And then you show up to work as an employee.
Oh yeah, super weird.
Like, what's that transition like? You go from being the CEO to an employee. Employees are great. That's not what I'm talking about. It's a big transition though, right? What was that like?
Well, I was very stressed out at the time because, I'm naturally a pretty paranoid person. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. I don't love it. I don't love being paranoid. It sucks. But at that time, I was really worried that the company that we worked for prior would get really upset and sue us, or that the competition would be really upset, or I just like imagined all these things that never ended up happening. But I was very stressed out. So there was a relief, I think, when I first got a job, and it was a little more structured, and there was a steady paycheck, and there was good health insurance,
right?
And
piano lessons were back on.
Yeah, exactly. So I was actually very relieved, but it was also weird to be the big fish and going into a larger pond and being like not the big. I mean, they gave me a very high level role, which was great, but you're not steering the ship. You're not the captain anymore. And there was a honeymoon period where the company that acquired us, they rolled out the red carpet. They loved us. They loved what we were doing. They thought we were going to change everything for them. And that was a different pressure that grew over time as well. And we wanted to, I really wanted that to happen. And I felt motivated and energized by maybe being able to do what we wanted to do the whole time, which was take what we built and just explode it and scale it. So it was a mix. It was really, I remember the time it was like a mix of relief. It was a mix of excitement and energy, and it was fun, and there were new people to talk to, and they loved what we were doing, and they just thought we were the bee's knees. And and then eventually it's like you realize, okay, well, let's do it again, right? You get over all that, you get back to where you were before, and you just want to do it again.
Yeah, it's like giving what's been described to me as giving birth. You forget about the pain and you want to do it again, right?
Exactly.
So you're right.
Yes.
I hear you. I love where you're going with this. I love that you brought up paranoid, because I think that's very common as well, especially in startup world, right? And do you think underneath paranoia or whatever is anxiety? Do you think yeah, that's
Well,
what drives it or fuels it?
I think I think they're inextricably linked. I'm not sure which fuels which, but
Right.
the thing you feel is anxiety, and maybe it's caused by paranoia, or maybe paranoia is a symptom of anxiety. But I was anxious as heck, and through the whole acquisition process, because it's lawyers arguing about stuff. Like, you start to think, is this going to happen? You've like wasted so much time trying to get this done. Is it going to happen? Is it not? And you realize, like, your whole life is just kind of on the line now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the most anxious I've ever been in my life. In fact, everything since that summer has felt like a vacation, honestly.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And I'm actually really thankful for that, because it really gave me perspective
Yeah.
on life, and having that fight or flight response so intensely for such a long period of time. Afterwards, when you recover, I'm looking around, and like, people are stressed at work, and I'm like, nah, you'll be fine. Like, who cares? You'll be fine.
I read somewhere, someone once told me, I read it somewhere, that that actually antidote to anything in life is a little taste of it.
Yeah.
It's not avoiding it, it's having just a little taste, and then seeing that you survived it, and then realizing, oh, okay, I'm stronger than I thought, and whatnot. I mean, final question for you. What lessons did you take from this entrepreneurial boot camp, very successful entrepreneurial experience, back into corporate America? Like, what things did you have to leave behind, and what things could you take with you to benefit larger companies?
Oh, it's a really interesting question. I would say that, I mean, it's going to depend, I think, on where you go, but I've realized that, and some of this is kind of focused to B2B. I don't have any B2C experience.
Right.
I would imagine there's a lot of things that are different about that, but you have to figure out, I think, if you're building something new, or a new product, or maybe it's an existing product and you're improving it, or you're trying to grow its customer base, you have to figure out, how do you get it to your customers? And when they're doing that for a startup, and doing that at corporate America, I think is the same. At the end of the day, like, they have to find out about your product, and not just find out about it. They have to connect it to a problem that they have. Otherwise, they're going to see it in an email thread or something, and they won't.
I think they have to identify a use case. If they can't identify a use case, I'm not sure what you have there. Would you agree? Is that true?
Yeah, definitely. They have to connect it to a problem. They have to connect it to a use case.
Yeah.
Like, and so I this is like one of the biggest lessons I learned, is that you have to figure out how to scale that. How do you get it to as many people as possible, and get them, as many people as possible, to connect it to a problem? And it's hard, and especially with all the noise of lots of other solutions out there doing similar or quasi-similar things, or unrelated things. I'm still learning this today. Like, I learn every day. I learn a little bit more about how to do this better. But that was something I really learned, doing the startup. I would say I also learned that, I used to think of companies as like countries, where there were just these rules and laws and things that were written down in stone. And it's not that. Like, you can really kind of structure things any way you want. It's just getting lawyers to write things on paper. And that was kind of an interesting realization. Like, everything is very ephemeral. Like, we as humans, we just sort of agree that if it's written on paper in some format, that we just have to follow those rules. And I feel like that's why we can cooperate really well as a large population, because we agree on some set of rules, like a myth almost. You know, but that really struck me in realizing that, you know, things are not as rigid as they have to. They don't have to be rigid. They don't have to be rigid. There's always room to simplify things, to make things smoother. You know, I run the Parents Association for my son's school. And you know, for years, we used to have, like, there's like 300 or so parents come on this one day, and they had to fill out this really long and complicated form with all this information, and it was confusing, and the lines would get backed up, and they just want to register their kids for school. And so when I first started, I looked at this problem and I thought, this just can't be. There's got to be a better way to do this. And so I built a streamlined solution. It was really just a better form that they could fill out with less questions, and built in some like mechanics to, if you wanted to buy stuff, you could just use your credit card right in the app, and we didn't have to take cash with a cash box and like do the math on site. Simplified it. We doubled the number of donations and raised money, and we halved how long it took everybody in line.
Amazing.
And so I don't think I would have been able to do that if I hadn't learned at the startup, going through the startup process, that things don't have to be complicated. They don't have to be rigid. They don't have to be that way. They get that way because of a lot of shortcuts, basically. Simplicity is better. It's not easier. It's much harder. But you know, rigidity is easier. But figuring out how you can basically trim fat, restructure things to a way that just makes it faster and more streamlined and empowers more people, the better. And that's the only place you can learn that as a startup, I think.